Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. I am so thrilled you're here today because honestly, we're tackling something that I think every single one of us struggles with on some level. So let's just jump right into it. Think about the core tension we all face day in and day out. You know what I'm talking about, right? It's that exhausting, deeply human instinct to just wait for the chaos to end before we feel like we can finally rest. We tell ourselves things like, well, as soon as this big project is over, then I'll relax. Or when this family crisis finally resolves, then I can take a breath. We're constantly postponing our peace, placing it just on the other side of our current problems. But today, we are going to look at a completely different framework, and it is absolutely going to flip that whole narrative upside down. So I want to pose this question directly to you right now. Are you waiting for the storm to pass to finally feel peace? Just let that sink in for a second. It is incredibly draining to constantly believe that true, deep-seated peace is only possible after a problem is 100% solved. It kind of turns life into an endless endurance test, doesn't it? We end up just holding our breath, white-knuckling our way through the week, constantly waiting for the finish line so we can finally exhale. But the real problem is, what if that finish line just keeps moving? Now, to validate that feeling, we can look at some incredible content over on Jennifer's YouTube channel, which is just fantastic for soulful encouragement when you're going through a tough season. She recently posted a deeply moving song, and it's literally titled Peace After the Storm, and it is such a beautiful, vital anchor of hope. I mean, we need that hope, that there is light again at the end of the tunnel. But what's really fascinating is how we can take that beautiful concept and kind of shift our perspective by looking at it through the lens of week 2 from the From Pressure to Peace devotional journal. It begs a huge question. What if we don't only have to wait for the after? What if there's a way to access that exact same profound peace right now while the wind is still howling? And that brings us to a total redefinition of the whole concept. According to the devotional, peace is not actually the absence of a storm. Peace is an internal condition requiring God's presence, not an external resolution. So the absolute crucial point here is this. True peace isn't found by escaping your circumstances. You find it right in the middle of them. It's entirely an inside job. It doesn't rely on your environment being perfectly quiet, or your inbox magically hitting 0, or all your problems being perfectly fixed. It relies entirely on what you are anchored to internally. Section 1. Case Study 1. Peace Without Resolution. For this first case study, we are jumping into day 8 of the devotional to look at a historical example of finding peace when a situation is literally as far from fixed as possible. The foundation here is John 14:27. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you, I do not give to you as the world gives. Think about that for a second. When the world gives peace, it almost always comes in the form of a solution, right? A completed checklist or an escape route. But God's peace? It doesn't require an escape route at all. It only requires His presence. It's a type of peace that exists totally independent of the external facts. Just consider this incredible contrast from the story of Paul and Silas in the book of Acts. On one hand, you have their external reality. They were beaten, they were chained, and they were locked in the pitch-black inner cell of a Philippian prison. They had no advocate, no lawyer, no clear path forward. Their circumstances were utterly 100% unresolved. But on the other hand, look at their internal condition. At midnight, they were praying and singing hymns. Singing. Their peace clearly wasn't waiting for the chains to fall off. In fact, the text actually suggests the chains fall off because of their peace. They tapped into an internal reality that completely superseded their physical prison. And what I love is how this ancient truth maps so perfectly onto our lives today. The devotional provides a modern echo for this, sharing the story of a woman in her first year of widowhood. Nothing about her life is resolved. The grief still hits her like a ton of bricks in the grocery store aisle or standing in an empty kitchen. But she has discovered that peace isn't the absence of sorrow. It's the presence within it. Some mornings, her internal condition is just anchored in a super simple 3-word prayer. You are here. She isn't fixed. The terrible situation isn't fixed. But you know what? The peace is completely real anyway. Section 2, Case Study 2, Calm in the Chaos. So, if our first case study was all about unresolved pain, day 9 of the devotional asks another massive question. How do we maintain a steady soul when the environment around us is just spinning out of control? The anchor here is Isaiah 26:3. You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast, because they trust in you. The devotional reminds us of the story of Daniel. A literal death decree was signed against him. He was going to be thrown to the lions. I mean, most of us would totally panic, right? We'd protest, we'd lobby the king, but Daniel didn't. He just went home, opened his window, and prayed 3 times a day, exactly like he always had. The external chaos didn't change his rhythm at all. In fact, his steady rhythm actually changed the chaos. And honestly, the modern echo for Daniel here is just brilliant. Imagine an ER nurse. The external chaos in an emergency room is constant, right? Alarms blaring, codes being called over the intercom, families crying in the hallways. She can't control a single bit of that. But instead of letting the panic take over the years, she learned to practice. She takes a single breath before seeing each patient and just whispers, "Lord, steady me." The chaos in the ER doesn't magically stop, but her center doesn't move. She proves that peace is absolutely not about a quiet room. It is entirely about having a steady soul. Section 3. The ultimate test. Defying all logic. Okay, so we've talked about unresolved grief, we've talked about chaotic environments, but day 14 explores a peace that completely defies human logic. You've probably heard this famous verse from Philippians 4:7, "And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Think about Stephen in the book of Acts. The guy was literally being stoned to death. Logic dictates absolute terror, panic, and defense in that moment. But instead, Stephen looked up to heaven, and his final words were actually a blessing, asking God not to hold the sin against his attackers. The peace he carried in that unimaginable moment just totally transcended his horrific circumstances. It guarded his heart when logic itself was completely unraveling. To ground this in our modern world, the devotional shares a truly powerful story of a woman sitting in a hospital parking lot right after receiving a terrifying medical diagnosis. On one hand, her external circumstance is quite literally a nightmare. She fully expected the panic to come rushing in. But internally, something shifted. She felt an unexplainable peace. Now, it didn't deny the seriousness of the diagnosis. Actually, scratch that. She wasn't in denial at all, but her heart just refused to surrender to fear. She described it later as feeling like she was being held while standing. Wow, that is what peace-defying logic looks like. Section 4. Finding your middle, the application. Now, it's one thing to read these incredible stories of Paul and Silas, or the ER nurse, or the woman in the hospital parking lot, but it's another thing entirely to actually implement them into our own messy lives. So here are the tools to help you stop waiting for your personal storm to end. These tangible takeaways are pulled directly from the journal prompts in the devotional. First off, practice locating God's presence without demanding answers. Sometimes you just have to say, "You're here." Second, when the chaos hits, take a breath and consciously return to a steady daily rhythm, just like Daniel or that ER nurse. Third, actively release the need for external resolution. Stop tying your internal calm to an external fix. And finally, when logic fails and the situation you are in is terrifying, consciously ask for that transcending peace to guard your heart. Remember, you can anchor your internal condition today, right in the middle of whatever mess you are facing. So, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this final, really provocative question to reflect on. What part of your storm can you find peace in today? Not tomorrow, not when the storm eventually passes, today. Because by shifting your paradigm from peace after the storm to peace in the middle of the storm, you unlock a strength that your circumstances can literally never take away from you. Take a deep breath, find your steady center, and claim that peace today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I truly hope this deeply encourages you. Catch you next time.